Our very special speaker today will share his definition of leadership, one that he has developed over his more than 30-year of business association and community leadership. Matt has been a scouting volunteer for more than 25 years, has 30 years of business leadership experience, and currently serves on the Economic Development Advisory Committee for his hometown. He has been in Toastmasters since 2003 and now serves as the immediate past international president. This might be his first presentation as immediate past. Please join me in welcoming somebody that we love a lot around here in District 84, distinguished Toastmaster Matt Kinsey, as he asks, are you a leader? Are you a leader? Distinguished Toastmaster and past international president, Matt Kinsey.
So that is the question today. Are you a leader? And I don't know. I mean, most of you, we've got almost 200 people on this session right now. I don't know you, so I don't know if you're a leader. There are certainly some of you I have seen display fabulous leadership characteristics. And I know many of you, because you're here for Toastmasters Leadership Institute, are interested in leadership, and many of you have leadership positions. But how do we define leadership? We're going to go through a definition I've developed over the past years of my life. I really want you to focus on the principles and don't get hung up on the words, because oftentimes we can hear a definition, we get hung up on the exact words. In this case, those exact words aren't as important as the principles behind them. So my first leadership lesson came when I was quite young in life. Do we have any athletes in the room? Okay, we're an older group. How about I used to be an athlete? Okay, a lot more hands went up for that. Well, like most kids, I wanted to be good at sports. And Amanda, I was terrible. Have you ever met anyone who struck out playing t-ball? Oh, somebody else did. Okay, I saw a hand go up. Well, after one baseball game, I walked up to my dad and said, Dad, I want to run home. And my dad looked at me. He goes, you want to run home? Now, we lived in a very small town in southern Ohio. In fact, the town was so small that when my parents moved in, they doubled the number of registered Democrats. 300 people in the heart of Republican land. And it's one of those towns where everybody knows everybody. So I guess my dad figured somebody would pick me up on the side of the road if I collapsed. So he got in his car, he took off, and I started running home. And I got home. It was the 70s, folks. Okay, come on. We're Generation X. We grew up on our own. All right. So I got home. I walked through the door, and my dad put his newspaper down, and he looked at his watch. Who picked you up? Nobody, Dad. I ran home. He goes, Matt, I think we found your sport. So I got into running. And if there are any other distance athletes out there, you know that feeling of the sun in your face, the wind at your back, hopefully, the feeling of being exhausted, yet fulfilled at the same time. And finally came the day for my first cross-country race. We were on the starting line. The starter raised her pistol. She fired. Bang! We took off. And I felt, I felt like, how many of you remember the television show in the 70s, The $6 Million Man? You know, no, 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 no. And that's when I realized that that's how fast I was actually running, because all of the boys were passing me, and then all of the girls. Out of 173 runners who finished that day, I finished 173rd. I was demoralized, depressed, defeated. I walked up to my dad, said, well, Dad, yeah, Clearly sports is not for me. I quit. And my dad said the strangest thing. I mean, Vicky, you may have had your parents tell you, no, you can't quit. You made a commitment. Or Marie, I know you're a runner. You may have had a coach tell you, quitters never win and winners never quit. But my dad looked at me and he said, no, you can't quit. Your team needs you. What? Dad, I couldn't even see the short little girl who finished in front of me. I mean, nobody cares I was here today. No one's going to care when I don't show up tomorrow. I'm done. My dad looked at me and he kind of chuckled. He said, well, Matt, first of all, that short little girl, she feels a whole lot better today because at least she beat you. Thanks, Dad. But more importantly, when you go back tomorrow, and you will, no one else has an excuse to quit. Your team needs you. I've thought about that a lot over the years. And I think what my dad was trying to tell me was something similar to what John Maxwell says, is that leadership is not about position or title or authority. It's about the ability that we have through our thoughts, our words and actions to change the thoughts and words and actions of those around us. Influence. Now, with all due respect to John Maxwell, I think he misses something because he just says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. But you can have influence, and if you don't do anything with it, it's not really leadership. So the first part of my definition of leadership is, let me see here, to exercise your influence. To exercise, to actually go out and use your influence to do something. But in what manner? So this is what we're going to do, is we're just going to build this. And I could see some of you are looking at that going, okay, I wonder how many points they're going to be, because we're looking at the spacing. Maybe you'll figure it out later. We'll get there. But we need to leave in a positive and supportive method with positive feedback. And Dr. Smedley figured this out actually over 100 years ago, that positive feedback is more significant in many ways than critical feedback. So what IBM found was that when they changed their performance metrics from negative-based feedback to positive-based feedback, they got 3 times higher engagement. A Gallup study that found that companies that did this saw a 19% increase in sales, a 29% increase in profits, and a 72% decrease in turnover. That one of the most costly expenses that an organization has. Now, the best ratio is actually 6-to-1, and some recent research is suggesting maybe as high as 7 or 8-to-1. And so that means in leadership feedback, unlike a speech, don't use the sandwich method. All right. How many of you ever suffered through the 1-minute manager? We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So don't sandwich on leadership feedback. The best ratio is providing it. Now that means it has to be regular and consistent. Because in one conversation, if I have to sit down with John Morrow and say, John, you're not doing what I need you to do, which would never happen. But if I had to do that, that's hard to get 6 to 7 positive comments for every one comment to say you're not doing what the team needs. And that means I have to have regular conversations where I'm reinforcing the positive things that John hears, the positive qualities he has, his smile, his enthusiasm, his passion for whatever team he's working on. And then when he hears that, hey, you're not doing what I need you to, he knows that I still appreciate him. And that this is more about those specific actions rather than about who he is. So here's some tips. One, it must be genuine. I mentioned the 1-minute manager. And for those of you who were in management when that book came out, you'd see all these people who went to the seminar and then they would come back. And one of the things in there was to catch someone doing something right. And so this is about positive feedback, but you'd see this. Your boss would be upset with you. They'd start going on to you, and all of a sudden you'd see them go, oh, I got to find something they did right to close this off with. And then they would say something that they absolutely did not believe. just to say something positive at the end. And we can tell. I work with kids and scouts. Boy, they will spot a fake in 2 seconds. They know whether you're there for them, and they will, unlike adults, they will let you know. Okay, with their attention. They will wander and move off. And you want to show appreciation, and the more specific you can be, the better off. So, Maria Martinez, thank you for helping make sure everything got set up properly, reminding me to get you my title and my introduction, making sure that I was set up and everything was set up. Now, what did I do? I've told Maria that she made my job easier. I did it publicly and I was specific. I didn't just say, thank you, Maria, for everything you did. That might last a minute or two. Okay. But when I get, the more specific I get, the longer that's going to last. And I focused on her efforts and her behavior, and it was timely. If I sent her a note next week, she might think, now I know Maria, but Maria might think, oh, he just realized he forgot to thank me for my efforts. And it loses some of the impact the longer you wait. So make sure it's timely and tailored to the individual. I've known Maria long enough that I know she's okay with getting some public praise. Not going on and on, but getting some public praise. Some people are very uncomfortable with that. So if I need to praise them in public, I keep it very short. And then I go and have a further conversation later. So those are just some tips to make sure you provide positive feedback in an appropriate way. So that's the second part of our definition, exercising your influence in a positive and supportive manner. But where are we going? You know, what is the mission? What are we trying to do? And history is replete with examples of leaders who led to things that did not uplift those around them, that did not unite people, but instead divided people. And we can think of the names here in Florida, you know, current and past leaders throughout this region, the world, all across the world. There are examples of leaders, and I could name, you know, Pol Pot, Hitler, Castro, just some examples of people who used their influence in a positive way with those that they were working with, but weren't going towards something that was worthwhile. So let's take a look at our mission. Does anyone know Toastmasters International's mission? Not the district mission, not the club mission, but Toastmasters International's mission is to empower individuals to become more effective communicators and leaders. Notice this mission does not talk about clubs. It doesn't talk about districts. It just says this is our global mission. And mission changes less frequently than your vision. A vision is our picture of future success. The mission should change very rarely because this is who we are. And when you do change the mission, it becomes jarring for people. Now, the district mission. We build new clubs and support all clubs in achieving excellence. Notice that's an and. Those who are at district leader training saw me put an or in there and exit out. It's an and. We need to build new clubs and support all clubs in achieving excellence. And the club mission, which hopefully you read at least once a month in your club meetings. Many clubs read it every meeting. We provide a supportive and positive learning experience in which members are empowered to develop communication and leadership skills, resulting in greater self-confidence and personal growth. That's what our mission is. Now, if Toastmasters International's mission doesn't inspire you, if the district mission doesn't inspire you, I hope if you're a club leader that the club mission inspires you. Because what we're doing is we're pouring from ourselves into other people, giving them what I think is one of the greatest gifts you can give somebody is greater genuine self-confidence. That ability, I'll give you an example. At the opening ceremonies, I bought a new shirt and I made it to honor our host country of the Bahamas. So I had an aquamarine shirt, I had a tie with some aquamarine and black in it, which is on their flag, and then I had a gold pocket square, just to make sure I was honoring them. And I'd had like 15 people come up to me and go, Matt, that looks great. Matt, look, that looks great. And then I walked over and Dan Rex's wife, Lori, goes, Matt, you look great. And I just went, yeah, I know. And it was so funny because she was just like, she started laughing, but it wasn't in an ego way. It was just a recognition. I've had 15 other people tell me this looks good. At this point, I know it looks good and I'm still appreciative of the comment, but it wasn't coming from like, oh yeah, I look good. You know, I'm gonna be on the cover of the mag. Just like, I know this looks good. And if you want to annoy me, I'll tell you one way to annoy me is to ask me if my wife picks out my clothes. The honest truth is I often pick out hers, okay? Because I'm very good with color coordination and she will admit it openly. So leadership is exercising your influence in a positive and supportive manner towards the accomplishment of a worthwhile goal. Now, if I stop there, most people would probably be pretty happy with this definition. It covers the essentials. This is the core of leadership. But some of you are looking at this, well, I'm sure he's got something else to say. There's more space left there. And in fact, I do, because I do think there are a couple of things missing. And one of those is values. Now, because we are Toastmasters leaders, I'm going to talk about Toastmasters core values. Core values are interesting. So everyone hopefully has their own core values. Whether those come from a religious upbringing, from personal life experience, from a philosophy of life that you have your core values. But when you join an organization, you agree to the core values of that organization. And it's not that Toastmasters is saying these are better core values than anybody else's core values. It's just saying this is what we agreed to. And we just added definitions to these, which will be published soon for everybody. But we're going to talk about what I think each of these means. So integrity. How many of you have heard, integrity is doing the right thing when no one's watching? I call that a middle school definition of integrity. And what I mean by that is it's okay. It's an outward sign that you're displaying integrity, but I think integrity goes far deeper than that. 6 p.m., June 23rd, 2021, Surfside, Florida, USA. These towers, everybody went to bed. It was a normal night like any other. They were going to get up in the morning and go run on the beach because this is just yards from the beach. They were going to go to Starbucks and get some coffee on their way to work. They were going to go have breakfast with their parents or with their grandkids. It was just a normal night like any other. And then at about 2 o'clock in the morning, they were awoken with the sound of screeching metal, crumbling concrete, and the screams of people who were falling to their death. And at 8 a.m. the next morning, this is what we saw. Now, this made the news in Florida for weeks. It made the news nationally for a day or two, like most stories. But everybody wanted to figure out what happened. See, 98 lives were lost. The next morning said 1 confirmed dead, 99 missing. Only 2 people came out of the rubble alive. So what happened? Well, the investigation, it's taken a while, but there are 3 primary causes that they found, among other things. So the first was a design flaw. There was a structural design flaw. And what that allowed is water penetration, specifically water and salt water. They're right on the beach. Those of you who live along the coast, you know what salt water does to your cars, to your doorknobs, to anything metal. It corrodes badly and creates weakness in the structure. But the most significant thing was a failure of the leadership to act. See, the board knew about the design problem. They knew about the saltwater intrusion. You could see it flowing in the parking garage. they had the price to fix it. And they were either unable or unwilling to pay the price. And because of that, 98 lives were lost. And the laws in Florida have been changed. They no longer have the option to not pay the price. They have to have structural engineering recertify the buildings, and they have to undergo these types of repairs. But isn't our life like that? We all have flaws. We all have propensities to do things. And this is not Photoshop. This is an actual photo of a building. Somebody built a spiral staircase to nowhere. Okay, we all have flaws that keep us from being at our best. And hopefully we have people around us who will help us understand those and point them out to us so that we can begin to work on those that we choose to work on. Let's be honest, some flaws we have, we're okay with, but other flaws are creating problems for us that we need to address to be as effective as we can be. What's the salt water in your leadership? Who's the person that you're listening to who doesn't have your best interest in mind? What are the thoughts that you are reading and absorbing that move you away from the mission that you have? Examine this. There's salt water. There's foreign thoughts that are intruding that are taking our mind. And sometimes they're internal. Sometimes there are an internal voice going, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not beautiful enough. You're not strong enough to deal with this. But you are. You are. And then do you clean it up? See, I'm speaking for myself, I fall out of my integrity at times. And I think many of you, if you're honest, would say the same thing. Do you take the effort to clean it up? Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it just takes an apology. Sometimes it takes a lot of work to clean it up, and it takes time. Are you willing to put in that effort when you fall out of integrity to clean it up? See, integrity is an inside job. It's when your thoughts and actions are aligned with your values and you make decisions based on those values rather than on personal gain. That is the way I define integrity. Now, respect. You know, how many Aretha fans do we have out there? I mean, Aretha is just amazing. And I think she has one of the best definitions of respect I've ever heard in her song. And I'm not going to sing it because I don't want to butcher it, but RESPECT, find out what it means to me. When I do this, I get outside of my thoughts. When I was in Africa, I got a big laugh from the crowd because I said, look, I go, I'm a white colonizer, okay? And they laughed. And I said, and if I come here and treat you like a white colonizer, is that okay with you? And they're like, absolutely not. That's right. I have to get outside of what my expectations are to others. Now, one of the things I'm known for in Toastmasters, and I think I scared your program quality director a little bit and your club growth director, because when I walked up to them, I knew their names and I had not met them. Now, Vicky didn't warn them, okay? And I think Vicky didn't warn them because when I met Vicky, her trio didn't warn them either. But this is something I work really hard on. And not just knowing the names and faces, because I create flashcards to study, but how to say the names. You know, as some names are easier for me, given my experience, than others are. And so I'll often ask somebody, please say your name the way, you know, you would say it at home, the way you want it to be said. And so we had a candidate from Mexico, and when I introduced her at the convention, I said, from Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico, Violeta Rios, okay? Because that's the way she says it. And I do my best with it. And what I'll often do is I'll have people, if I know I'm going to announce somebody's name, I'll ask them to send me a recording of their name in WhatsApp so I can hear it over and over again. And I put that effort in because the name is so important. Now, service. We think service is easy, right? simple definition is putting our times and talents to the use of others. But I used to work for a company called Kinko's, which is now FedEx Office. And I was in a strip center in Houston, Texas. And at one end was a restaurant that I shall not name, but you might be able to figure out how. There was another restaurant on the other end, and there was a deli in the middle. So if I didn't bring my food for dinner, because I worked evenings, I didn't have many choices in that plaza in the time I had for my dinner break. So I went to this restaurant quite often. And I'm one of these people, maybe you're like me, where if I go to a restaurant, it's for a specific meal. Okay, I'm not a menu peruser. If it's a new restaurant, I'll peruse. But if I'm going to a specific restaurant, it's for a specific meal. So they already knew what my order was. I would sit down and they would put a Coke down in front of me when I sat down, because they, I'm a Coke guy. And this particular day, I did not get my expected level of service. Now, restaurants are interesting. If you go to McDonald's, you don't expect the same level of service that you might get at a Chili's or at a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Okay. And if you did, you're going to be blown away. But if you go into a Chili's and you get treated like you're at a McDonald's, you're going to be very unhappy. Okay. And if you go into Ruth's Chris and you get treated like you did at Chili's, you're going to be very unhappy. It's a different level of expectation. But they didn't meet my normal expected level of service. And I work for a customer service company. And so I decided to say something. And I tried to talk to the waiter. And I was just trying to explain that I wasn't really happy. The food was cold. It was late. I had to get back to work. And he's like, hold on, let me get the manager. I never asked to speak to the manager. Well, the manager comes over, a young woman in her late 20s, and she says, I understand there's a problem. And I start to talk. I said, well, my food's late. She goes, oh, I'm sorry, sir, let me comp your meal. I never asked her to comp my meal, but I had to go. I said, no, let me just pay the bill. I'm going to go. I had to get back to work. And I thought it was over. But that night, I stewed over it. If you ever had one of those situations where you thought it was over and then go home later that night and you're like, no, I'm not over this. So the next day I decided I'm going to call the regional office. And I call the regional office, leave a message for the regional manager. She calls me back a few hours later and she goes, yeah, I understand you had a problem at our location here in Houston. And I'm like, yes, ma'am, I did. I just didn't get what I normally expect. The food was late. She goes, oh, I'm so sorry, sir. Can I please give you a free meal? And I just lost it. And I go, ma'am, please stop talking. And she's like, okay. I said, I want to let you know, I was upset with your store. I'm not upset with your store anymore. She goes, okay, good. Why not? I said, because now I know where they get it from. I said, can you just listen to me so I can tell you what happened? And she goes, okay. And she finally listened. So at my third attempt, I finally got to tell my story about what had happened. And I told her, and she paused for a second, and you will not believe what she told me. Can I please give you a free meal now? All I wanted, if anybody had ever asked, was to not have the same experience the next time I came in. And I was planning to come in. I was there once a week. I was a regular. I wasn't a Cheers regular, but I was a regular, and I showed up and that's all I needed. But no one asked me. See, service is in the eye of the beholder. So club officers, VPs of education in particular, do you know why people are in your Toastmasters club? Do you know that their goals change from when they join to 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years later? Do you know what they are today? Or are you making the assumption? See, when I joined, if my VPE had been pushing me to speak, I would have left the club because I joined to become better at evaluating. Because I was really good at negative evaluation and I was terrible at providing positive and supportive evaluation. And that's what I needed to work on. But my VP understood that, and I actually evaluated my very first meeting as a Toastmaster, as an official member. I was a speech evaluator, and I evaluated 10 weeks in a row. at the start of my Toastmasters career. And they finally said, can you please do your icebreaker now? I was like, sure, I'll do my icebreaker, but getting better at speaking wasn't my goal. And she understood that. Now, have I gotten better at speaking in Toastmasters? Absolutely. But I've been speaking in front of groups for 48 years now. And I've been in Toastmasters for almost 20. So I learned a lot about speaking before I ever joined Toastmasters. And you have people in your club who do the same thing. Now, excellence, I'm watching the World Championship track and field competition right now. And I'm just reminded of this because excellence, and Aristotle said this, I'm just going to read his quote. He said, excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. See, excellence is one of those weird things because excellence sometimes is a standard, but I don't think that's what we're talking about in Toastmasters. What we're talking about in Toastmasters is the process, the pursuit of excellence, of getting a little bit better each day, of making wise choices, of having intention, sincere effort, and executing intelligently, and letting choice determine your destiny. Now, some of you recognize this gentleman. Some of you who don't, going, who is this guy? You might recognize the name Lance Armstrong. As an amateur cyclist, this man, and he was my hero. He won the world championship, was diagnosed with stage 4 testicular cancer, went through treatments, reinvented himself as a cyclist, and then went out and won the most famous bicycling race in the world, the Tour de France, 7 times in a row, and was hailed as either the greatest cyclist in history or the greatest fraud. See, there were rumors about him, and the rumors were that he was using performance-enhancing drugs. And every time he was accused, 2 things happened. One is he would make it his mission to destroy the life of the person who accused him. Whether it was a massage therapist, a medical professional, a teammate, a newspaper reporter, it didn't matter. He would go after them and make their life miserable and destroy people's careers. And the second thing is he would hold a press conference and he would say the same thing every single time. I can almost quote it word for word. I've been tested more than any athlete in the history of the sport, and I have never failed a test, which was a lie. Because we know now that at least one test that he failed, he made a contribution of money to cover it up. But finally, the evidence was just too overwhelming. And he decided to tell his story to who else? Oprah Winfrey, in front of a national audience. And he admitted that not only had he used performance-enhancing drugs, he had done it in such a systematic way that we had not seen since at least the 1970s East German Olympic teams. And he had no regret. It was clear from that interview that he would have made the same choices over and over again because he was justifying what he had done. And that almost destroyed my love of cycling. I cycled 260,000 miles in my life, but I almost lost it over this. Because every time he said he was clean, I believed him. And I needed to believe him because he was a source of inspiration for me. Because every time somebody would ask me, Matt, are you working hard? I would say, yeah, not as hard as he is. Matt, are you committed to your craft? And I would say, not as hard as he is. Now, if I saw him today, I would wish him well, because I've had to move on. But see, values, winning isn't everything. Values are. And we're missing one further thing. And I know I'm right at the edge of time, but I'm going to ask your indulgence because I think this is the most important thing. Several years ago, I was at a conference held in Scottsdale, Arizona by the late, great Bob Proctor, the Toronto Tornado, one of the most famous names in personal development, producer of The Secret, star of The Secret, and just well known. He's since passed away. And at lunch, the MC came up and said, ladies and gentlemen, over lunch, we want you to go out on the streets of Scottsdale, Arizona, find a stranger and take them to lunch. Now, I don't know. Well, actually, I do know how well that would work in Florida because I'm in Florida. It would not work well, and it was not working well in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'd walk up to somebody and say, hey, would you go to lunch with me? And they'd be like, no, 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 no. And they'd run away. I don't know if they thought I was trying to ask them on a date, convert them to my religion, or get them to sell Amway, but it was not going well. So finally, I sat down right in front of this restaurant and I was frustrated. If you've worked with me, you know I'm a get her done kind of guy. You give me a task, I love checklists, okay? Because I'll get those things done on that checklist. And this was unacceptable for me not to accomplish this task. And as I'm sitting there, I'm hearing this voice in the back of my head, and I'm trying to ignore it because, you know, I'm focused on something else. But then all of a sudden I realized it was my mama. And I know you better listen to your mama, you know, and what she said to me was, Matt, in whatever you do, find your purpose. Now, I know this is completely different from what Simon Sinek says, where he says, find your purpose and then go out and do. My mom's saying, you're doing something. You have a task. Find the purpose within that task. And I said, well, what do I want to do? You know what? I want to thank a veteran for his service. And I know many women have served, but in that moment, I was picturing an older gentleman with white hair, a wizened face, a cane. I heard the word Arizona, but I'm in Arizona, right? And I stood up and I walked around the corner, and Pim, he was right in front of me. The exact man I had pictured. Wizened face, white hair, a cane, and a ball cap that said USS Arizona. And I walked up to him and said, sir, I'd appreciate if you go to lunch with me. And he looked at me and goes, why? Well, this is a good start. He's not running away. And I said, well, I made a decision a few minutes ago. I wanted to thank a veteran for his service. I noticed your cap. Would you please do the honor of going to have lunch with me? And he looked at me and he said, well, my mama told me never turn down a free lunch. And you better listen to your mama, right? So we went in the restaurant, ordered our food, started talking. And I looked at him and eventually I said, so Bill, tell me, did you know somebody on the Arizona? He goes, know someone? Hell, boy, I was on the Arizona. Because I will never forget that day. It was just before roll call, assembly on deck, and I heard the sirens go off. And my first thought was, oh man, here comes another drill. But then I saw everybody pointing out across the horizon. And I realized real quick, those weren't our boys. The next minutes felt like hours and seconds as bombs dropped and torpedoes in the water. My ship got hit. The stack behind me blew up and I got thrown into the waters. And as I struggled to keep my head above the waves, I watched my ship sink to the bottom of Pearl Harbor. I will never forget that day. Eventually, the silence was broken by who else? The waiter, as he brought the check. And I reached out and I picked it up quietly. And as I picked it up, it was snatched out of my hands. And I looked up and Bill had it with a big smile on his face. I said, Bill, I told you I wanted to take you to lunch. He goes, yeah, I know what you said. So what? And the only thing I could think of to say in that moment was, well, I guess it's a good thing my mama told me never turn down a free lunch. And see, I almost missed that moment because I didn't understand the assignment. The assignment was not to complete a task. The assignment was not to get outside of your comfort zone and do something uncomfortable. The assignment was to take a few minutes and connect with somebody on a human level. See, leadership at its core is an exercise in human relationships. You have to start with your heart. So leadership is exercising your influence in a positive and supportive manner towards the accomplishment of a worthwhile goal while following an agreed upon set of values and starting with your heart. If you choose to lead in this way, you may not always be right, but you will never be wrong.